It's very nice to be here this morning. And as you heard, we have been working very hard to develop something that is an equivalent to an AP test for several of the less commonly taught languages. At American Councils, I'm going to use that as a sort of a shorthand for where I come from. It's American Councils for International Education. We've been around since the early 1970s. We were originally doing mostly academic exchange between the US and, at the time, the Soviet Union. And we have since expanded our reach around the world. We've got offices in countries all over the world. We've got about 180 people in our Washington office. And we deal a lot with international exchange. So we're sending students and teachers from the US overseas, bringing teachers and students into the US. So a lot of what we do is sort of dealing with the sort of the logistics and mechanics of getting people to and from places so that they're in positions where they can be furthering their language study, because the study of these less commonly taught languages is really at the core of our mission. And so when I came on 19 years ago, I was largely working with language learning. So we had at the time, the World Wide Web was very exciting to people, and so we were putting things that were sort of workbook-based things up onto the web. And in about 2004, I first sort of caught wind of the fact that we were starting to work with the College Board to develop a test for Russian. We were calling this the Prototype Russian AP exam. And as I learned, as we started going up to New York and meeting with the College Board very regularly, as you heard, it is a very expensive endeavor to develop an AP test. And when you are dealing with less commonly taught languages, there's sort of an inherent, you're sort of playing against the odds there, because you're just not going to have the types of numbers that they would expect to see from, a STEM course or something. And yet they really recognized the need, because they heard it not just in Korean, but in many different languages. They were hearing that people wanted a test like an AP for a variety of reasons, but one of the biggest is to keep kids in the pipeline, right? And to attract students into studying these languages and to keep them there. Because what often happens is students will study at elementary and maybe up through a certain point in high school, and then they start, these language courses start getting edged out because they're starting to think about, their academic resume and what they're going to be, how they're presenting themselves to these colleges. And frankly, if there's courses that don't offer an AP track, they often get lost in the shuffle because the students are prioritizing in that. So, in 2004, we started to develop something for Russian. It was very much a prototype. We were, had a small number of schools that we were working with, and we continue now to work with Russian and we've expanded it out to Korean, Arabic, Portuguese, and we're in Chinese. I'll explain why Chinese is a little bit tricky, but so this year was sort of in terms of expanding our languages in 2017. We're still very much in a pilot phase, and we're trying to recruit students. We're trying to make people understand what the test is, why it's beneficial, why a test like this isn't necessarily going to drive heritage students away from your enrollments if you're a high school teacher, right? But rather how this test sort of takes into account both heritage and non-heritage students. And because I've heard this concern also many times, is that if we have a test that heritage students can take, they'll say, well, I'm not going to take the course, I'll just go straight to the test. However, if we're familiar with heritage students, we know that they are going to be strong in listening and speaking, but the test equally emphasizes writing and reading, and we often see that heritage students, if they haven't had that formal education, they do poorly on the test, a lot more poorly than they would have had they actually studied. But so I just give that all as sort of a little bit of background, saying that we're now over 12 years we've been working, it's been mostly with Russian, but now that we've expanded things out. And this has been largely driven by our president, Dr. Dan Davidson, who has sat at the chair of the College Board World Language Committee for many years. And so he's been on that committee. He's been one of the active voices saying that the College Board should be thinking of some way of recognizing the importance of the study of language outside of just Spanish and German and French. And so what we've come up with now is we're really sort of building out a large coalition of institutions, organizations, to make this a reality for some of these languages. So, as I said, we've worked very closely with the College Board, and I will be sharing with you the College Board endorsement of the NEWL tests, which is a very strong endorsement and says to guidance counselors, to placement officers, to language teachers, that these test results should be taken exactly as an AP score in terms of advanced placement and credit. We've also been working very closely with ACTFL on this in a number of ways, but on a very practical level. The test itself measures all 4 language skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. American Council, we provide the speaking and listening component of that, and then the students, as soon as they're finished with that, they go on to the speaking and writing, which is handled by ACTFL. Right? So we've actually partnered on the administration itself with that. And we've also been reaching out and working very closely with language-specific organizations such as ICANN. And so in Russian, there's American Council of Teachers of Russian, NKS for Portuguese, ICANN for Korean, and Qatar Foundation for Arabic. So what is NEWL? NEWL is the national examination for world languages. And importantly, it's proficiency-based, right? So if you're not familiar with sort of proficiency versus performance in the testing world, in a proficiency-based test, we're really interested in what the students can do in the 4 modalities. It's not a question of what do you know, per se, but rather, given authentic texts, given authentic listening prompts, can you understand these? Are you able to comprehend these on a level that we can measure and put you on a level for each of the 4 modalities on the actual scale? So as I said, we're currently offering Arabic. Chinese has an asterisk next to it because there actually is a Chinese AP. And so we are working with the College Board to make the testing of Chinese, give it a broader coverage, where we would offer Chinese, the NEWL Chinese, only at those schools that don't offer an AP Chinese, right? So that's still sort of under in development. But in 2017, we tested in Arabic, Korean, Portuguese, and Russian. Now, as I said, we're still very much in a pilot phase of this, and we're trying to sort of get some numbers gathered. And it's been a challenge because there's the fear of failure in performing poorly, both on the parts of the students and teachers as well as their parents. And because this is not just flat out an AP test that people know the AP, and they know what the expectation of the AP is, and they know that, you know, by and large, higher ed institutions are going to give advanced placement credit for that. They see this that's sort of endorsed by the College Board. It's not, you know, it doesn't have the full AP on it, so there's a lot of hesitation, understandable, on that. So we currently, for Russian, we tested about 500 students this year. But the numbers in the other languages are much lower. Portuguese was in the 50s, Arabic was about the same, and we had 36 students in Korean. And so the numbers are still very small. And as we're working to really roll this out, we're working sort of at a number of different levels. Number one is like what I'm doing here, is sort of making sure that that teachers and high school academic coordinators know about this test and what it means and what it tests and how students prepare for it and how it affects sort of the the day-to-day lessons and curriculum. But also, and very importantly, working with these higher ed institutions to build that network of those schools that are accepting these scores, right? We do that largely through the language programs themselves, right? So that's another important role in working with the language-specific organizations, is to make sure we understand where the critical schools are in terms of getting that endorsement accepted and getting the placement accepted. Do you have a question?
I do. The College Board is introducing money.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, when you're introducing this, if someone at the College Board is saying, well, we developed an AP and these have you seen that?
Well, see, the problem is there's just not. There's no money to be made. I mean, there's like for them. I mean, at their, it is so small, right? So this is, I mean, frankly, I don't know if we'll ever make a cent on this. I mean, we're doing it. I mean, we've gotten grants and funding for that, and it's certainly with these numbers, just not close to itself, right? But we recognize the importance of it, right? We want to get this established, and we want to make sure that and again, mainly for attracting students in and keeping them in the pipe, letting them see there's a career path here, right, into higher ed and beyond. So yeah, truth be told, this is not a huge money maker for anybody, but yes. It is the exact same price as an AP test. And so one of the things that we've been working on is, because it's to get the wheels greased and to get students in, is we've been looking for ways to sort of offset, to take that off of the individual students, right? So, and that is by like, for example, with Ken and Cutter Foundation, and we've been working on putting aside some money so that we can either subsidize or outright pay for students to take it, right? So that we don't put it on the individual families to do that, because again, they understand that, we understand that until we get to a certain point and we see that we've got hundreds and hundreds of students who are going off and getting these places, which we are seeing in Russian, by the way. We've been doing that long enough, and ACTR, which I had up there, that is actually one of the organizations that's under American Councils for International Education. So that's sort of us, and so we know where who the faculty members are and the heads of departments and things like that. And we've had time, over the last 12 years, and we've been rolling these students out. And we did and interestingly in Russian, at the very beginning, we did a very large study where, when we were trying to set our placement recommendations, right? So like if you get a 3 on the test, and again, the scoring is just like an AP, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I will show you exactly what our placement recommendations are, but when we were trying to establish what those are, to say that, look, if you score a 3 on this test, that means you go into, and I don't want to say it off the top of my head, but I think it's maybe second year. And what we did was we tested a huge number of Russian students who are at universities and looked at where they were taking it, and we used that to cross-validate it, to say, look, we see students who are in first semester, second year that are scoring a 3 on this test, or whatever. I'm sorry, I should have that slide up right now, and I'll get to it. I don't want to speak on what the placement exactly is, but so we used that. We used, I believe it was 1,600 students that we tested across the country to look at where students are actually performing, so that we then set our recommendations according to that. But so we, again, as I said, we test the 4 modalities. And in the reading and listening, again, all of the, I'm going to take a question, yes.
So is the main difference of these tests from, like, say, the Apple test that's offered by
Yep.
the TFL?
Right.
Is it similar to the AP tests? Or?
So, I should note that with the speaking and the writing, we are using the Apple system to administer. There's a slight difference, though, in terms of are you familiar with the Apple test at all? It's something that American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages, ACFL, has put out. And these are things that students can sign up for. They take them online, and they're they're sort of they'll have like an avatar, and they go through these scenarios where they're then put into situations where they're asked to either speak or write. Now, these are performance tests, right? Students, the topics are released beforehand, so students can actually study the particular topic, right? And they can then demonstrate a performance of how they do that. When in the prompts that are used on the NEWL test are actually not released, so which makes it more of a proficiency test because the students don't know what's coming. They're just put into a situation and asked to respond to that without any sort of study beforehand. I would say the main difference is that when we get to the recommendation, you'll see that's the difference. We have a full endorsement by the College Board telling higher ed institutions that, look, if you have a student coming to you and they have a 4 on this, and you're given this advanced placement recommendation, as the College Board, we say you should treat this just like an AP2 score. Right? And so the proficiency levels that we test are from novice high to intermediate high. Now so students they can't get an advanced on this, even if they are advanced. But if they demonstrate on all 4 skills that they are in fact perhaps sealing out, they'll get an intermediate high with a star, right? Meaning that as far as we know, they're at least an intermediate high. And again, we target heritage and non-heritage learners seeking college credit and placement. Again, there's in Russian, in Korean, in many different languages, there are large populations of heritage students who don't realize what the language that they have, how beneficial that can be to them, both in terms of their academic career as well as potentially in their actual career. And so we're really hoping to sort of catch them early and give that sort of level of importance to the study of the language to recognize, hey, I've got this, and I can demonstrate this, and I can be recognized for my ability to do this, right? And that's what we're really trying to do here, is to give them the opportunity to demonstrate what they can do in terms of language, and then to be recognized for that on a very formal and official level. So the test itself, you can see it's almost a 3-hour test. Very long when we give them a break in the middle. And the way that we administer the test is it is done online. It is proctored by a local school, and if the school doesn't have a facility, then we work with them to help locate whether it's a library, cultural center, something like that, where they can have access to computers, where they have somebody who can be there to proctor the test throughout. And so in the reading and the listening, students are presented with authentic prompts taken from a variety of different sources, such as books and newspapers to radio ads and things like that. So none of the prompts are constructed. They're actual, real, authentic uses of the language. And then they're given multiple choice questions in English to test their comprehension of the language that's in the prompt. And again, we ask the questions and the choices are in English because we're not testing their ability to read the question or the choice we're interested in their ability to take this authentic sample, and then and we're assuming that they're fluent speakers of English, because and we're targeting American students, so again, that if you start asking the questions and putting the choices in the target language, you're sort of confounding a little bit what you're testing there. And so we want to just say we're only interested in your ability to process and comprehend the authentic content itself. And again, in the oral and written, that is done through the Apple system, and I'll show you a little example of what that looks like. So this is the College Board endorsement. It says AP endorses the NEWL, developed by American Councils for International Education, and recommends them to our member institutions in the following world languages. These proficiency-based exams are designed to assess students' skills deemed critical by government and business in the 21st century. And so what College Board has been doing is they have been communicating this message to through their network to their member institutions, both at higher ed and at the high school level. Oh, and I should just say that when, we're in the process of getting ready to report scores for 2017, and so students, when they get these scores, they're told that we tell them what they should do with these scores, right? That they should be going to the school that they've been accepted to, and showing them that recommendation and expecting to get that fulfilled. And if not, we are there to step in and we've done this on many occasions where a student will go and they'll say, hey, sure, we would accept an AP, but this doesn't say AP on it. And then we have managed to talk to them and successfully, it's a lot of work. But again, we tell the students that they should take this and they should argue for it, and we're there to argue with them. And that's essentially how we're building up our network, is by taking the actual students and making sure that they're not getting denied that. So just really quickly about the target proficiency level. Again, we go through novice high, but we're really sort of testing the intermediate, low, mid, and high. And basically that means that the students are able to create language on the level of simple sentences. They should be familiar with and be able to understand things in a variety of topics concerning themselves. And again, working with a wide variety of topics and content domains, they should be able to demonstrate their ability to work with the language and vis-a-vis the authentic prompts. So again, in the speaking and the writing, they should be able to exchange greetings and do simple purchases and things like that. And so these scenarios that they're asked to, that they're put in, give them the opportunity to demonstrate their ability to do these things. And then in preparing for the NEWL, they're encouraged to think primarily about improving their proficiency and cultural competence in the target language. I mean, that's a very broad thing. Again, there is no, because this is a proficiency test, there is not a set curriculum or a textbook or a list of things that they must know this, and be able to, use these grammatical structures. They need practice with the language. They need to be regularly pushing their own level in terms of working with authentic language and producing the language and speaking and writing. And so in terms of the evidence-based approach, we use the ACTFL proficiency guidelines as well as the ACTFL ratings that are on there that they have. And so within each task, each item or question, it targets the student's functional abilities and the content areas that the ACTFL guidelines outline, right? So it's not... The ACTFL guidelines and the ACTFL standards give a very detailed description of, at the different levels, what types of things should a student be able to do, what types of situations should a student be comfortable performing in each of the 4 different skills. And so, again, the ACTFL standards really serve as the best sort of guiding principles for how students should prepare for a test like this. And then in terms of the evidence, we look at how the students respond to each task and whether or not they meet those criteria or fail to sustain the criteria for that, right? So within any of, like in the reading and the listening, there are a number of items that are targeted at the different proficiency levels: intermediate, low, mid, and high. And so if they're able to sustain a performance at that, then they will have sort of, we can say that yes, they definitely have shown evidence of being able to perform at that level. So again, it focuses on general proficiency, and the College Board, as I mentioned, there is the World Languages Committee, and they have developed a framework for world languages, and again, we've been very involved with the development of that framework, and so these tests definitely reflect that framework. Everything is based on, again, authenticity and real-world situations. The tasks, again, are targeted at particular proficiency levels. The prompts are in the target language. The questions and answers are in English. And broadly, the content domains are balanced for culture, daily life, government, business, entertainment, science, technology. And then there are a variety of topics in genre, which there's too many there to but I think you have a printout there. So very quickly, and I have no idea on time, so I should probably there is a clock up there. Okay, good. No,
Still have 20 minutes.
Okay, all right, I'm going to move past. Okay, so in reading comprehension, again, short authentic texts, broad range of topics. There are 44 items, so they'll have 44 questions in reading. And again, the questions themselves are probing at the level from the text to make sure that the students are able to perform according to the ethical standard. So here's an example. I don't read very but it's a short, they're relatively short prompts, right? So students aren't reading long articles, right? They're reading a short authentic prompt, usually an extract from something, where there is a clear question that can be asked within that based on what they're reading. And we have to be very important to avoid things like cognates and things like that sometimes and so I should just note that when we develop the tests, we do have an online system for test development. And so for each of our languages, we have teams of people who are, some are in Washington, but for the most part they're not. These are university professors, test specialists, who come together as a team. We have large teams of people who work on. So any item will start by, we'll have a passage selector that will find the passages. They put that into the system. It lets the next person who's going to start writing the items know. And so we have a long series of reviews by content experts, by language experts, by testing experts. And so any item goes through a long workflow before it gets ready to field test. And then we send it through field testing, and we get statistics. We do IRT-based statistics on it to see that the item is performing properly, that there aren't any possible double keys, two potentially right answers, or that it's performing better or worse for according to gender or heritage status or a number of other different things. And only then will that item make it out onto the test, which is part of the reason why testing is so expensive. Because it requires a lot of review, it requires a lot of people, and it requires a lot of data to be generated on it. We need to, in the end, we have to have a combination of the expert opinion as well as what the data tells us about how these items perform. Anybody have any comments on the Korean sample? Yes.
The answer.
Oh. I don't know. Can somebody, what is the answer here? All right, it will be closed to the public, so don't make any plans. Okay, so for listening comprehension, very similar to the reading, again, the multiple choice questions, but the students are given an audio prompt. They hit the play button. They can play it as many times as they want. We don't restrict that. I should also note that students are free to move within a section. The sections are very strictly timed, but within that section, they are free to move back and forth, right? So it's not one of these, once you answer it, it's gone forever. So that if the students have extra time, they can go back and review. Again, authentic audios, very much like the reading, we're targeting very specific events and things that are happening that are being evidenced by what they hear. I'm not going to bother playing it. And again, it covers a lot of the same topics and content domains. In fact, I don't even see where the... Okay, but so there's, the students get a button, an audio button, and they play that. And then they answer the question. And so on the oral part, again, they're guided through these situations. They have about 9 different opportunities to speak, right? So they on the computer, there's a person there, and they're telling them about their situation, and then they say, okay, now go ahead and tell me whatever it is I've asked you to do. And then they hit record. So the students are there with headphones and a microphone, and then those spoken samples and the written samples are then rated by Apple, and we are then given those scores, and then we take the 4 scores, and I'll show you an actual score report, and we combine those to create the composite score. Right, so it's very, and they move between the novice high and the intermediate high. Apple does test the full range, but for this test, they're doing things such as, if we look at the intermediate examples, discuss what we usually do in situation X, right? That situation has been set up, and they go ahead and demonstrate. Similarly with writing, they'll be given a situation, and then they'll be asked to type an email, write a memo, these sorts of things. They're relatively short, and again, what the raters are looking for is there are very specific functions that students are being asked to perform, and it's just a question of whether in this short sample they're able to demonstrate, and again, across all of the samples, whether they can demonstrate that they are able to perform at that level. So, as I said, when we look at our items for the reading and the listening, we use IRT statistics on that, and so does this have a little laser pointer? And so, we can see here that we're looking at this now from our sort of internal admin view here, and we can see that now we've had an item that's gone out to a number of students, and we're able to perform some statistics on it. And we can see here, these are this was the question, this is the correct answer, the key, and the distractors that we've got here. And along this scale right here, this is the level of the learners, from the less proficient to the more proficient learners. And this is the correct answer here, and you can see as the student's level increases, the likelihood that they're all choosing the correct answer is rising until it's at the very top. And then the other distractors are sort of performing evenly with it. So this is an example of good performing item. Not all of them look like that. Sometimes you'll see another distractor that's competing right with the key, and now it's time to go back and look at why is it that everybody's choosing answer B into this. We also do diffs, meaning, so for gender, is this item performing differently for boys versus girls? Heritage students, are all the heritage students failing to get this because there's some, or the non-heritage students are missing some concept that's sort of embedded in here that heritage students know. So again, each of these items goes through a series of field testing and reviews before it's put on the test. So very quickly on the scoring, and this is the actual placement recommendation that I was talking about. So if you score a 5 on this, that means you're essentially getting intermediate high on all four skills, and the recommendation for that is first semester of 3rd year. Even at a 3, right? So there's this fear of failure, right? So students think, well, I need to get a 5 or I need to get a 4. Even if you get a 3, the recommendation is that you go into 2nd year, you get a full year and the credit that implies as well, right? And even at 2, it's still, the recommendation is to move forward a semester, right? So even if you're getting a 2, which may seem like very low, it's still demonstrating that you've got something that's worth something in your academic career. And so each student then, yes, sir.
That is going to be
Yes. And so again, like the fee that we charge, the 90, a lot of the things that we do are we just keep in line with the AP. That's equivalent to AP, but it's also based on our research of by testing these the students at least and we plan to do this in other languages. That's a big undertaking though. Is to validate that and to say, hey, look, if we give this same test to students who are currently at these levels, how are they scoring? Right, and that then really sort of tells us, well, yeah, if you are in first semester of 2nd year, and by and large the students are scoring a 3, that tells us that number's right. But so like the price of the test, the dates of the testing, we actually give the test 1 week before all the APs go, so as not to sort of conflict with their schedule because we're not in their scheduling system. But we report the scores on the same date, and so we try to sort of keep the look and feel of things as close to an AP as possible. So when the students receive this, they get not just that number score, they also get a breakdown by level, which again, if they're taking that to a university professor in a language department, and they say, this is my profile, right? I mean, this is very instructive for people who are considering that placement and seeing where they're going to fit within their own system. They also get, so they get their composite score, right? It's going to say you got a 4 and you scored the following way. And now, I'm not going to go into all the details, but like there is an equation for that combination because there are the 4 skills. And sometimes you'll see students, especially in heritage students, where they'll be scoring very high in the speaking and the listening and very low. And so the way that all sort of gets boiled down into one number is kind of a complicated equation. But so they get the sub-scores for each profession, proficiency levels at each skill. The students also get, along with their score report, so they basically, in a couple of weeks, they're all going to get an email saying, here, click on this secure link, put in your authorization code, and they get a PDF. And that PDF includes the certificate as well as the descriptors and guidelines for understanding their scores. And we include the recommendation, right, saying if you got a 4, you should be at this point, and a certificate. And then, and so we send those to the students, and then the students can ask us, and then we'll send those to the institutions themselves for the students. And again, if they run into trouble, we step in, and that's what we're sort of gearing up for as we roll into the fall, is really being active and aggressive and making sure that we're following on with the students and making sure that their placements are being accepted for everything. Okay, I'm sure there are lots of questions, and I have about 5 minutes, so sure. Yeah, that was, yeah, that's, sorry. Yeah, this was put together as an example. That is a strength. Yeah, no, the dates are in late April. And I should just say that very quickly, so if anybody is interested or knows of anybody that's interested in this, there's NEWL at AmericanCouncils.org is the email. And also if you just Google the NEWL test, you'll get to, we describe the whole process and how you register. And we usually, the registration starts in December, and it goes, so it's a long registration window. It's December through the end of March. The exam itself is at the end of April, right? So we have about 4 months where students, and then somebody from their school will register their students.
I know American Council receives funding for education.
Yes.
How's the proposed budget affecting the program?
This is something that we are, it's not being funded by government at all. We've been working with, sort of within that network of organizations to fund, and a lot of it is coming out straight out of, we're funding it ourselves. So yeah, as long as we can. Yes?
I know most AP exams are designed, you take a course, at the end of that year you take that AP test. We don't take them multiple times. But is this because language is a progressive thing? Is this designed so that maybe at the end of each year the student might take that?
Sure, yeah, and we've had, and in Russian we found that students will do that a lot, right? So, and especially like if you're just coming back from a study abroad experience or something and you're like in 11th grade, you can take it and then you can take it again. And and you know, again, addressing that question of fear of failure, it's, you know, you don't have to report this to anybody. Right? You know, and if you want to take it, you know, multiple years, you can do that as well, right? And just report your, you know, just say, hey, I took it this year.
Previously, you mentioned, I couldn't find the slide that was mentioned. You said about was readiness standard, and when it was published, and I don't know, where can I find that standard?
Are you talking? Let me go back to. I think that was. So I was talking about mostly I was talking about the ACTFL standards, right? And so, you know, the ACTFL standards are, you know, published at actfl.org. Okay.
So is it within the actual standards?
I need to look at the World Readiness Standard. Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry about the top. Like I just. Oh.
Yeah, it was based on.
Yeah, that was an actual project. Yeah. So I'm sure if you Google that actual, that's what it was. Yes.
Do you see any benefits to that except for college? Because then you make
So, and I should note that this exam is one of many. I mean, we give about 120 different exams a year. Now, this is the one that is sort of the most labor intensive because it's got. I mean, we do a lot of exams for individual colleges. We do some placement things because in our item banks we've been developing items for like 12 different languages for many years now, and so we have a pretty nice item bank that we can assemble tests, right? So, you know, but yes, we do some of that in terms of college placement. We work with a number of different universities that use us for, and by the way, we are about to do a big field testing initiative where we're going to offer it as if schools want to have their students take it twice, once at the beginning and once at the end, they can do that. There'll be two slightly different, there'll be different tests, but they'll be measuring things on the same level. And so again, if you email, if you're interested in participating in that, where your students, where you could be using that as either placement or as sort of a benchmark, and then, you know, end of the the semester, end of the year, to evaluate your own students. That's available for free. And in fact, we're giving them like money to do. And you would just email NEWL at AmericanCouncils.org and say I'm interested in doing this. Do we have time for one more question? Okay. Yes.
We all partnered up with, like, for example, Nestle, the Nestle program, where the students go for about 6.5 weeks
Yep.
intensive.
Yeah, we test all the Nestle students.
Okay, because
Yeah.
my daughter did last year. I don't think this was maybe being done then.
In which language was it?
She was in Korean.
Oh, yeah, we may not have, we test for Nestle Russian, Chinese, Turkish, we may not do Korean, I'm not sure. But yeah, because that program is administered through American Councils, and so we do a lot of that in terms of, that's a large part of what we do is qualifying for these programs as well as sort of pre and post
Right.
program
When they
evaluation.
come back, they just do an OPI, but that doesn't really
Yeah.
test their writing and
Okay.
reading, and so I didn't know.
Yeah, I think you're probably right that we don't do, sorry, I don't know, like again, we do like 120 tests, I don't know them all.
Can we give a loud applause